Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. Background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
All right. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I am joined by my co-host on this broadcast, the one, the only, Mike Scully.
What's up, sir?
How are you doing today?
Good. Just came in on two wheels, trying to get back in time for the show here. We went for a country drive to just kind of what I call windshield therapy, to just kind of enjoy the 80-degree day here in Texas and the spring weather, and encountered an accident on the way back that we had to detour around. But by the looks of it, it looks like it may be a fatality. So saying a quick prayer for those impacted and those involved, but it was not a good scene.
Yeah, for those listening, Mike and his family like to drive. It's a hobby for them.
It is.
And I've never met anyone that's quite like that before. Because usually when I try to drive across the country or drive somewhere, I want to get there as quickly as possible and not be behind the steering wheel.
Yep. We did about 230 miles today, so.
All on a Sunday.
All on a Sunday after church.
And how many did you do on your vacation last year?
6,400 something.
Yeah, it's crazy. My my day was pretty crazy. Our pastor at our church is actually out of town. He's down in Alabama, and he actually ended up speaking at 3 churches, I believe, today, or 2 churches, and trying to touch base with them because those are our supporting churches. So he's talking to them about supporting our church plant and whatnot. And it was truly amazing. I think that we actually had 2 churches, I believe, both do monthly support. Like, they agreed to monthly contribute to our church, which is amazing. That's an awesome blessing to have that financial support. And then we had a church, I guess, reached out to him and was like, "Hey, can you swing by?" And he did. And they just gave him an envelope and said, "This is our help. This is our contribution to your ministry." And it was a check for $1,000. And he walked away, and we were like, "Praise the Lord." We just didn't
Seriously, wow.
expect that. But yeah, my day, we were running around because he was out of town. We had a guest preacher come in who actually was my oversight pastor for safety and security at. So I was talking to our guest earlier. We're down to a science. We've been doing this for 4 weeks. We set the entire 3 rooms up for our church in 15 minutes. We're like flying, like we're putting banners up. We're connecting AV stuff. And he comes in, my old oversight pastor comes in, and he looks at me, and he looks at everybody like running literally to do stuff. And he's like, "James," he's like, "I would offer to help, and I said, don't worry about it. Go grab a cup of coffee, because at this point, yeah, you'll be in the way. You won't be able to, you'll be in our way." But he's like, I think I'm going to do that. So he like walked over to the coffee shop and started grabbing a cup of coffee. So
It's funny.
It was a lot of fun though. He had a great message. It was all on living our church plant is called Thrive, and Thrive Church, and his message was in the New Testament, but it was basically on how, our hearts have to be right. We need to get right with the Lord, and focus on having a life that's thriving. And so it was really good. It was, every message that I've heard has been very encouraging so far there, and it's been good. We had, I think last week we had someone get saved. We had a lot of visitors, and we've been running about 60, I think, which is pretty amazing for starting off. But every Sunday, because like we're in a library, we had the doors, we closed the doors for the music. One of the librarians actually came to us and said, "Hey, you guys can go ahead and open the door, so because we want to hear the music. Why are you closing it?" And we're like, "We're trying not to disturb anyone." And they're like, "Everybody loves you guys, don't worry about it." So it was pretty amazing. But anyhow, if you have joined us, if this is your first time, welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us for the next hour and listening to our broadcast. If you haven't joined us before and this is your first time, again, also welcome. Hopefully we won't scare you off, but we've got some great resources at our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com. And we also have a church security app that you can download that's got some fantastic resources on it. And as always, you can catch a repeat broadcast during the week or on our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel, just type in Church Safety Guys, and that'll bring that up, and you can go through past episodes and catch up with things. And if you click subscribe on the lower right hand corner, then that will allow you to get notified whenever we go live or do new content. So I will jump into our I almost said our victim. It's not her. It's not our victim. Well, no, he's somebody that we're getting to know quickly and getting to know very well. So I'll bring him in here. Jeff with ECAP. Thank you for joining us tonight, sir.
Hey there. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. It's always great to talk to other ministry minded folks, and we love what you guys are doing because it is something that's needed for sure in our culture and with our churches. So I'll just turn it over to you. If you could just start us off and kind of explain a little bit for our listeners what ECAP is, and then your role and how you got started with it.
For sure. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'm here with you in Jacksonville, Florida, on the east side of the state of Florida. I've got 4 kids, and so this topic of child protection is very personal. I spent almost 10 years at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and that was really where my introduction to child protection started. We were having more and more kids come to campus with the growth of Boys College, and needed some solutions for child protection. And so we quickly implemented a program there. And then I went to be a part of another ministry. Also, they didn't have a child protection program, and I helped implement one there. So I have this experience working with pastors and ministry leaders in a seminary context, and then also helping implement some risk management programs. And then a few years ago, I think it was 3 years ago now, the Houston Chronicle came out with a series of sexual abuse in the Southern Baptist Convention in particular. And it was called Abuse of Faith. And that series, I think a 6-part article series on sexual abuse in ministry, really broke my heart. And as I started talking with other ministry leaders and pastors, we realized that this is really a great commission issue. One of the things I like about the work that you do with church safety guys is the heart of a shepherd that you bring. So this isn't merely a risk management topic or a safety topic, but we recognize that as we're serving Christ's church, that there's a role there that we must have a ministry mindset when we do these things. So long story short, we started sharing this concept about creating industry standards for ministries in child safety, and then those standards becoming the basis of an accreditation program. And so over the course of 2 years, we brought together a committee, followed the framework for creating industry standards, ran it through a legal review, and working with ACSI, Association of Christian Schools International, who very generously let us use their accreditation material. We're currently running trials of this program. So I'm talking about standards, I'm talking about accreditation. Some people, their eyes may start glassing over thinking, what in the world is he talking about? And so, the end here is that if you complete the accreditation process, it's about compliance. Are you doing what you need to do to keep kids safe? The annual compliance process, which is accreditation, yields our good housekeeping seal of approval. And that seal, the ECAP seal of being an accredited member, is intended, it's not bulletproof, but it's intended to give peace of mind to leaders and to parents that kids are being able to hear the gospel, grow in discipleship, allow spiritual formation to take place in their ministry context.
That's awesome. I know a lot of churches, we've had churches in the past kind of reach out to us and comment about how important protecting children are, how important protecting the kids ministry is. And sometimes, I think that gets overlooked a lot. We at our church, we actually do once a year, we'll do a giant meeting where we bring all the Sunday school workers, all the kids workers in, and we go over policies and procedures and spend a lot of time doing that. And I know I had the opportunity to actually go through some of the resources on your website, and I just want to shout that out as well, because there's some amazing resources. There's an online free class that's available that I started going through. And we're actually going to have all of our children's workers go through that as well. And it's just an awesome resource to be able to say, hey, this stuff is happening out there. So instead of just taking the attitude of being proactive instead of reactive with some of these things is a blessing. So I'm definitely thankful and grateful that we managed to come across you all, and I'm very happy that we get a chance to do ministry together for sure.
Likewise.
So,
yeah, thanks, James.
Mike, do you want to jump in there and say anything?
You covered a bunch of the different. I think this is such a heart of kind of where we're seeing as a whole from a safety ministry perspective. Certainly, if you can't protect the kids, then what are we doing? And I think we're seeing more and more with scandals in the church, not just related to kids, but churches are being run by humans. We're flawed human beings. We're susceptible to the temptations of the devil, and you know what? Things are happening, and we're seeing it happen on a global scale. We're seeing it in multiple denominations. We're seeing it in even mega churches that you think are so put together because they've got to that size. Nope, they're even having troubles. And I think we've seen it across the board, whether it be substance abuse or whether it be child abuse or other scandal of sorts related to bad judgment of leadership. And I think there's an importance there that safety teams have a obligation to look across the board. We're not just there to stand post on a Sunday morning. We're there to look at the entire thing from start to finish and understand where is their risk, where is their opportunity, and can we mitigate that? And can we reduce the proximity to people? Can we reduce the potential of different things? I got some P's to cover a little bit later, but those are a little tease of a couple of them there.
Well, and I'll actually I'll throw it over to Jeff here, and you can chime in on your thoughts. But the other piece of it too is making sure that we're looking for it, we're protecting ourselves, and then also we are being able to respond accordingly and appropriately, and not just um, turning a blind eye. And then once we do respond appropriately, what's the aftermath like? How do we? So there's definitely steps that you can work through, but I'm always impressed, um, and unfortunately not always in a good way, when I talk to churches, or when we do our annual thing, and I go through and say, hey, here's some, and I'm not by any means an expert. I go off a checklist from that I've accumulated, but I'll go through and say, hey, if you see this, and this as prevention, this should be a flag. Let's get somebody else involved. Let's bring leadership in. Let's talk about this. And it's always interesting to me how people are like, well, I don't want to stick my nose in. I don't want to do this or that might cause something else, or I don't, it's not really my business. And I'm like, well, actually, it is your business, because as long as an individual has entrusted in the children's ministry, has entrusted a child to the church's programs, it is our business, and we have a responsibility to make sure that kids stay as safe as possible to the best of our ability. And one thing I've always been very, very happy with at our church is that our pastor has always, from a safety team perspective, has always said, the kids are first. Like, I don't care about anything else. Like, we'll survive, but if you're shorthanded, I want somebody in the kids area. I want you focused on protecting the children and making sure that um, they stay safe, and that the ministry stays intact. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of accountability too. But I'll throw it over to you, Jeff, so you can chime in there.
Well, yeah, April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and so it begs the question, largely, of our culture: is sexual abuse, is child abuse really an issue? The statistics are actually stunning. So 1 in 3 girls before the age of 18 will be sexually abused at the culture at large. And 1 in 7 boys before the age of 18. So we know that sexual abuse is a very real issue. And then, interestingly, Church Law and Tax recently came out with a statistic that says over the last 5 years, the sexual abuse of a minor was the single greatest reason that drove churches into the courtroom. And so we know that it's happening in ministries. So what are we doing to be prepared? As you had said, we would much rather be proactive on this issue than reactive when you think about the damage that is done. We come at this not just from a risk management perspective, but as Bible-believing Christians. And so we believe every human being is created in the image of God and worthy of dignity and respect and honor and protection. And so we believe we have a stewardship, and one day we as church leaders, as ministry leaders, will stand before the Lord and give an account for those things. And so, yeah, we call all ministries, Christian schools, churches, and those that serve children to be proactive on this. If I can, I'll just give quick 5 categories. When we talk about child protection, 5 categories just to kind of hang your thoughts on. Number 1, we believe that child protection starts with good governance. Number 2, screening of workers. By workers, I'm talking about any employee or volunteer that works with children. Number 3, training. Those workers must be trained before they're working with kids. 4, we call this category child safety operations, and that includes everything from check-in and check-out procedures, ratios of workers to children, and so forth, transportation policies, that sort of thing. And then finally, our standards include a response plan. And so we're asking for ministries to develop a response plan before abuse is reported. And remember, when I talked about abuse just a moment ago, you might think of abuse as internal that could happen. We're working to prevent abuse internally within the ministry, but also also recognize that there could be evidences or abuse that shows up from an external standpoint, right? That little
Right.
kid who's coming to your church, and you realize that something may have happened at home or someplace else. And so our workers on the front lines of child ministry need to know, what are the signs and symptoms of abuse, and what do I do when I see that?
Our churches, Jeff, I know as a private, nonprofit entity, religious based, our church volunteers mandatory reporters?
So that depends on the state, but generally speaking, yes. Again, just generally speaking, all 50 states have different mandatory reporter laws, not to mention the U.S. territories. But generally speaking, most states have a mandatory reporter law that would include, so for example, here in Florida, some states have certain types of roles or positions like first responder
Right.
or physician that has a mandatory reporter. But in Florida, it says any person who suspects, so there's no roles or responsibilities, any person who suspects any sort of child abuse or neglect has a duty to respond or to report.
That's how it is in Ohio. We've gone through, I know for our state, we've gone through the law, and that's something that we cover, and we have the 800 number to reach out and that sort of thing. I often, a lot of times, I think about, I think about the distinction that you made, Jeff, between internal versus external, and I tend to think about it as if a child comes in from the outside and we see that, right? Because for us, we actually, up until COVID, we actually ran a bus ministry where we had 7 or 8 buses that were constantly picking up kids and bringing kids in and that sort of thing. And so that was kind of our focus. But from an accountability standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to also be concerned with internal.
Mhm.
And certainly it seems like maybe that's something that gets overlooked a lot.
Mhm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
You're talking about external abuse sometimes being overlooked. I mean, I think the main reason there is that many people aren't trained. They're not looking for it. They're busy doing whatever ministry that they're doing. So I think and that's why this month of April is so important, that we can raise awareness of what are some of the signs of abuse. How can you recognize those, and what do you do when you see them? I'm actually going to share a link with you that we've put together for Abuse Prevention Month here that includes some of those indicators.
Sure. I'm just going through some of the comments here and some of the questions. We will try, if you're listening and you're streaming live on Facebook or any other social media platform, we will try and get to your questions tonight. If you have any specific questions for Jeff, go ahead and post them in the links, and then we will do our best to help facilitate that and get that question to him. So what are you know what? Actually, let me share that link. So we've shared a few links that Jeff passed along. Let's go ahead, because of our time, let's go ahead and take a quick sponsor break. And then when we come back, we will actually jump back into the discussion. We'll talk about prevention. And wow, that 30 minutes went really fast. But we'll go ahead and talk about prevention, and then we will jump back in and try and get through some of your questions. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
When you let Checker take care of background checks, you get more time to focus on your ministry. Over 8,000 churches and faith-based communities across the United States use Checker. Checker lets you quickly and easily screen new volunteers, so you'll spend less time on paperwork and administrative tasks. Our fast, accurate background checks reduce turnaround time per applicant by 72% on average. Checker partners with church management systems, including Tithely, Planning Center, Rock RMS, PushPay, and Full Method, so it's easy to integrate into systems you're already using. Trust Checker for faster, easier, more reliable background checks, so you can focus on what brings you all together. To learn more, visit www.checkr.com/church.
We all deal with stress on a daily basis. When not properly managed, we can face burnout, mental, physical, and spiritual burnout. It can be detrimental to serving in church safety and security, as well as other ministries, and affect all areas of life. Coming Back brings biblical guidance for such a dilemma. In the book Coming Back, best-selling author James McGarvey takes a biblical-based approach to address and prevent ministry burnout. As you read Coming Back, you will easily relate to James's shared experiences, be inspired by Scripture, and grow through the practical and applicable instruction found in this much-needed book. This encouraging read will affect you and your team in a positive way to continue the path of ministry with an energized and encouraged spirit. Through biblical and practical knowledge and experience, James shows that it is all about coming back to focus on what matters, coming back to the cross.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
All right, welcome back to the Church Safety and Security broadcast. I am your host, James, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Scully, and also Jeff with ECAP. And we're talking about the protecting your children, protecting your kids and your kids' ministries. And I do want to shout out real quick for two things. First of all, if you have access to the internet and our website, you can visit churchsafetyguys.com and go over to the conferences and events. And we have two conferences that are coming up that you really don't want to miss if you're in the area. ECAP actually has a luncheon coming up in Kentucky in Louisville here in April. And then we have our Church Security Essentials Conference coming up in Orlando, Florida on May 14th. And we still have tickets available for that. There's actually, for both events, there's still available seating. But for us, excuse me, for the Church Security Essentials Conference, really looking forward to it. We are going through and selling tickets pretty quickly, but we've got a number of fantastic speakers, and Jeff actually is going to be one of those, and he's going to jump in there and talk about ECAP and some of the things that they can do to help churches. So Jeff will be there, but we also have sponsors with U.S. Law Shield. We'll have somebody there from them, Two-Way Radio Center and Motorola, and then also Vertex is actually, those three folks are some of our sponsors as well. So you definitely don't want to miss that. We've got a full, I don't think we can get anything more in the schedule, full packed day.
But there's
but
breaks. I mean, there's
oh
breaks in
yeah,
there too. So I mean, it's not like one of those so overwhelming days that you can't consume it.
for sure.
That's not our style.
No, it isn't. And we build in a lot of breaks and a lot of opportunities to network and fellowship. And that's kind of our goal, is so that you can come receive some awesome content and then have a chance to talk to the speakers and interact with folks. So yeah, we've got some fantastic folks lined up, great ministry based topics and content, and you definitely don't want to miss that. So um, jumping back into the topic at hand, Mike, do you want to start us with your P's? I want to
Sure.
circle back to that.
I have a list of 8 Ps. I think looking through them, listening closely to what you said earlier, Jeff, there's definitely some overlap, I think, there of where you've talked through your 5 core points. But I try to listen to them this way, or kind of memorize them this way, as a way to kind of look through or have a lens by which to look at kids ministry and how I've approached it with the churches that I've been involved in. So we start out. I title this list about prevention, and so it happens to have a P right off the bat, but that's not one of the 8. But we're going to run through 8. So the first one is preparedness. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, you have to prepare. That's the key to success in anything that you do. 2 is having plenty of people as volunteers. You want to be essentially have the ability to make sure you have coverage all the time, and adequate levels of coverage in the places that make the most sense, especially in the kids areas. It's important there. Number 3, proper training. You want to make sure that the people who are there are not just babysitters, that they understand that the duty that they have to care. So it's important that they have training to understand what those expectations are. Number 4, procedures for medical allergies, any sort of handling situations that may be unique to that child. Allergens in that area, not having peanuts or snacks or other sorts of things that can be a challenge and a risk of safety to those kids. Of course, in procedures can be check-in and check-out and all the other areas, but I do cover that under a later one as well. So number 5, protocols, fire, evacuation, other sorts of areas where you need to have standards around. Number 6, parents. How are you dealing with their arrival, their departure? How are you dealing when a kid breaks down? How are you dealing with communication to those parents? That's all important to make sure that those are covered. Number 7, proximity. And that is who's in close proximity to those kids. At all times, you want to understand, what does that look like? And finally, because of the proximity that can exist, you want to make sure is safe distance or appropriate distance is the best way to describe it. But lastly is pairs, is making sure that there's accountability with the people that are caring for those kids, that when you're taking a child to a bathroom or they're being left, if there's the last kid to be picked up, there should still be a pair of volunteers there together so that no child is left alone with another volunteer. So there's the list of 8 that I use.
Pretty impressive. You could be a preacher.
He comes up with that stuff during the break. I don't know how his brain works.
I had this one.
I don't know how his brain works that fast, honestly. Sometimes we work together on projects all the time, and I'm like, what in the world just happened?
Acronyms. So, I don't have an acronym for this one because it's just a list of P's, but I think it's how I think. I think in lists, and I think of ways to have kind of monikers or ways to remember things quicker. But it's kind of the starting point to kind of make sure, without a big, long, exhaustive play-by-play checklist, more P's, you really got to have that lens by which to operate. So if you have a starting point, you're less likely to miss something, even if you don't have the checklist right in front of you.
For sure. I think one of the questions that I do want to try and go back to, if we have time, is the safe distance that you mentioned, Mike, and see what you think about that, because often churches will reach out to us and say, where's the balance? Like, we want to be open to the community. We want to be welcoming to even people that maybe have made mistakes in the past. And where is that line, I guess, of making sure that there's extra precautions, and how do you do that?
We've worked really, really hard to make sure that our child safety standards can reasonably be implemented in any ministry context or setting. By the way, those are freely available on our website. So it's Evangelical Counsel for Abuse Prevention, and our website is ecap.net. And so all of that information is freely available online as a matter of our public charity, really. Um, so so really, where do you start? Because child protection can be kind of overwhelming, especially for a
Mhm.
pastor who's not been trained in these things at all, and maybe gone to seminary, and they probably didn't mention, except for maybe the last few years, they didn't even mention child protection at most seminaries up until recently. So where do you
Sure.
start? But we've worked really hard to find that balance. We want to make sure that ministry can still take place, and yet we want to do it through the right lens of protection. And so, yeah, where do you start? It's not easy, but you got to start someplace. It's like eating an elephant, right? And I also would want to say there's not one element of your child protection plan that's going to solve all of your problems. A common one
For sure.
misconception is background checks. Background checks are important. You should do them, but as far as the total weight of your child protection program, it's a very, very small percentage. So still important to do. But we look at a holistic approach. And when you put all of those layers together, it's intended to provide safe environments for kids and workers, frankly.
For sure. And I do love that you have that under your under your screening of the five steps, but it's important, but you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean just doing a background check isn't going to prevent and isn't going to stop anything officially.
Right.
Yeah, related to screening, background check is only one of that standard, if you will. And so,
Sure.
yeah, we would do background checks, but we really think it starts with an application, an interview process, actually calling your references. Happens all the time. You ask
Yep.
for references, but did you actually call them? And then background check is a part of that. Even something basic like checking a government issue ID. I could tell you stories about someone falsifying a social security number, which is
Hmm.
frequently used to run background checks. And so, have you verified with a government issued photo ID that the person that you're interviewing, the person who's applying, and the person you're running the background check is all the same individual?
Yep.
That's kind of crazy because I honestly I would not have thought about that. I would have taken it for face value and probably just run with it. So
Well, and a big point is a background check is what it could have possibly found from that point backward. It doesn't necessarily mean that once
yeah,
they're serving on your ministry that they didn't do something wrong. You're not going to catch that also unless you run that background check annually.
That's
And
right.
you're looking for additional things. And it still may not catch all of that. There are things that go unreported all the time that are not going to show
sure.
up. I mean, you could buy a car that isn't going to have an accident that shows up on a Carfax.
That's right.
It can happen. It's the same concept.
Yeah, and we could do a whole episode just on background checks alone, but you've got sanctuary cities, which are, or excuse me, sanctuary counties. So, for example, Cook County in Chicagoland is actually a sanctuary county where if you ran a background check, the results of that check aren't going to show up unless you actually walk into the county courthouse because background checks
Hmm.
are done at a county level. So you've got plea downs, you've got a number of things that, to your point, Mike, mean that you can't put all of your hope into background checks, but you still should do them.
Absolutely. So what are some things that Jeff, what are some things that you think would be a good place to start for prevention?
So on our website, we actually, back to your point about checklists, we have some
Yeah.
checklists available on our website. They're free. Church leaders, ministry leaders can download those and use them to conduct kind of a self-diagnostic of how are we doing? I know we do background checks and we do some screening and we do some training, but how do I know if that's sufficient? And so I'd encourage our listeners just to go to our website, download those for free, and take the little quiz to see how you do, and hopefully identify some ways to improve.
Definitely. And I did actually just share that link in all the comments. But if you're listening to this at a later time on YouTube or one of the podcast channels, feel free to visit our website, churchsafetyguys.com. And if you go up to the top under CSG trusted vendor, you'll see ECAP listed, or you can just go to ecap.net and click on the resources tab up at the top, and that'll pull up all of the policies and procedures checklist. There's a training checklist. There's really a enormous amount of free resources that are on there. So, and one of the things, actually, you guys have some great articles as well that I've been sharing back into like our group. But if you scroll through that and you look at it, there's a free e-course, The Capable Guardian. And that's what, that was one thing I was talking about earlier, that it's a couple hours to go through it, not labor intensive, not brain intensive. It's written at a very easy to understand level, but it's got some great points of information on that.
Teresa does a great job. Teresa Sidebotham helped lead the committee that created our standards, our child safety standards. She's an attorney in Colorado Springs, a great Christian lady who sadly does, well, not sadly that there is a need for this sort of thing,
Sure.
but spends most of her time investigating abuse incidents. I'm thankful that she's on those cases, but I wish to put her out of business, to be honest with you. But Teresa Sidebotham is a part of Teleos Teaches, and she and her firm have generously provided that training resource. Just a quick comment, when it comes to training, resource videos like hers and others that are out there are a fantastic place to start in understanding what is abuse, what are mandatory reporter laws, what are the basics of a child protection program. But then you also need your own ministry specific training program. And so think through your specific context and who's your child safety coordinator and what's our response plan based on the specific needs of your organization.
For sure. That is that's a lot of information, but it's a great place to start. And if you're trying to maybe tighten up your policies and procedures of your children's ministry at your church, and you're going through and maybe you're kind of convicted with some of the things that should be a little bit stricter or policies in place, etc. Jeff's website is really, I mean, that's an awesome place to start. So I would definitely recommend going and checking out the resources and use the checklist, use the training checklist. Much of this, again, it's not, and we've had churches reach out to us before that have said, after we talk about a topic like this, they're like, well, I've been in kids ministry for 50 years. I don't know what you're saying. Nothing like this has ever happened. And I think to an extent, we need to be in the world, but not of it. And this is one of those topics where I love the passion and the dedication that folks have to hold people accountable. And if you look at accountability as a passion to do what's right and to do what's right biblically, then you should have no problem. There should be no hesitation to say, are we doing everything the best that we can to protect everyone and to instill a culture, create a culture of value, like what you were saying earlier, Jeff, that everyone has value and we need to protect those that can't protect themselves. That's just a good thing to do. So, you were going to mention, I'll throw it back over to you. You were going to mention something about a book giveaway. So I want to allow individuals listening to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So ECAP is glad to provide to anyone who's listening here to Church Safety Guys broadcast a free copy of a book by a survivor. Her name's Jennifer Greenberg, and she's written the book Not Forsaken. And so thanks to some generosity from her publisher, the Good Book Company, we'll make that available for free. All you have to do is contact us through our website, ecap.net. Mention this broadcast, Church Safety Guys, and we'll get you, obviously, your mailing address as well. And we'll get you a copy of Not Forsaken by Jennifer Greenberg.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And if you're listening tonight or at a later time during the week, definitely take advantage of that, because it's a great resource. I haven't had the opportunity to read it myself yet, but it is on my short list of of books that I want to read from our guests. And it's definitely a resource that's available. So you don't want to miss it. Um, so one of the things that we haven't really talked too much about, and we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to come back and talk about um, what how should we be handling a situation if it's already taken place? Like, if we're, maybe we have a child that's been abused, how do we move forward, and what are the best course of action for those listening to handle that? And I say, I say handle, but I don't like that term. I don't like because it's not a handle. It's somebody's life that we're,
Mhm.
trying to help and we're trying to move through. But what are some of your thoughts on that? Like, where, if those, I guess, checks and balances have been breached, what would the next step be?
Yeah, so it's complex, right? And if you're talking about internal abuse, I mean, the very first thing to do is to report that, and to investigate what happened. Obviously, removing vulnerable persons out of harm's way. It sounds like a no-brainer. Sounds obvious, but we've got to make sure that's clear. If abuse is happening, we want to make sure that it stops immediately. And getting help is one of the first things that a ministry leader can do. Sadly, we believe that pastors and ministry leaders often don't report those things right away, and so there are very, very strict consequences in some states related to mandatory reporter laws. I recently learned about a pastor who failed to report an abuse situation, and he's no longer able to serve in ministry with a felony on his record. So local governments, state governments are taking that very, very seriously. So understand the mandatory reporter laws in your state, in your jurisdiction, and abide by those. Make sure that everybody on your team understands their duty. And even if they don't have a duty to report as a mandatory reporter, even consider some of the ethical and stewardship implications of getting help from professionals, experts, to investigate a situation of abuse. Really, when you think about mandatory reporter, what you're looking at there is the government saying, you don't get to decide if abuse actually took place here. If you suspect it from taking place, let the professionals investigate and figure out what took place there. And so there's a list of state agencies. They have various names across the country, but Department of Children and Family Services, DCPS, is common. Or if you're not sure, just call 911. That's the best place to go for immediate help, depending on the situation. So report abuse. Obviously, you want to handle that situation with grace and compassion. And there's a full checklist actually on our website from Teleos Teaches. If you end up in a situation that involves abuse, there's a checklist on exactly what to do. Document, care, provide counseling, therapy as necessary, and just get help. Insurance companies are a great source of help. They've got tremendous resources, have investigators and legal counsel ready before something happens, and be ready to ask for help sooner than later.
Absolutely. I don't want to emphasize, I don't think I can emphasize it enough. Ask for help. And especially when you're navigating something like that, because you want to make sure everything's documented. You want to make sure that you have an attorney on your side that understands and can support you. Because certainly the last thing that you want to do is make the situation worse because you didn't report it right away, or you didn't grab the authorities and say, "Hey, I have a question about this." And even pastors or full-time church members that might be listening, there's nothing wrong with reaching out and asking. Like, nothing bad is going to happen by saying, "I need some help with this, and I need to better understand this process." And there's certainly a number of resources on ECAP's website, but at the same time, there are certainly local resources connected with, local law enforcement and county family services, et cetera, that, that you can reach out to and say, hey, partner with those folks as well, and say, hey, how do I make sure that this doesn't happen to us at our church? And I guarantee between between the folks with ECAP and local resources, they would love to talk to you specifically and say, okay, thanks for reaching out. This is what, we would help, encourage you to do. And there are certainly different aspects of this when we're talking about specific events with the attorneys that, you do need to be careful of and careful talking about and sharing within the church. So definitely make sure that you speak to an attorney before you start compiling information and do things accordingly for your state. So that's my disclaimer for that. But Mike, you wanted to
Yeah,
jump
I
in.
think anytime this happens, certainly once it gets out, you're going to have a response of sorts with press and other sorts of things that are going to come to your front door. So I think you need to be prepared for that as well. And it may be something as simple as understanding that says, you know what, due to investigation that is ongoing, due to have a statement prepared, but also due to the folks that are involved, being a minor. At this time, there is no statement. We will make something available when we're ready. And so that at least is a statement. It's kind of a no comment statement, but it's not something where you're just pushing them away, because if you're trying to push them or shy them away, they're going to push harder. You want to give them something, and you want to let them know that you're going to provide something. So you keep them kind of understanding. So that communications planning is important when something like this happens.
Jeff, you wanted to jump in as well.
Yeah, just really quick, because I know the time is drawing to a close, but just the importance of believing the victim as well. I kind of assumed that, but I don't want to assume that here. To make it very, very clear that when you get a report of abuse, you need to believe the individual. There's been far too many heartbreaking situations of church leaders not believing reports and allegations of abuse. You need to believe them. You need to report it.
Absolutely. And I will definitely herald and second that as well. It's very easy. We all know how busy church ministry can get, and running around and trying to accomplish things and do things. But this is the type of thing, when you're starting to piece together a story, this is the type of thing that should take priority. And if you are a safety individual, safety director at your church, and you're asked to help with this type of evaluation, investigation, et cetera, you need to pull yourself out of other things that you're doing and put this as the number one priority and number one focus. And in the past, anytime, just from personal experience, anytime that I've ever done a larger scale investigation, thankfully it hasn't been about child abuse or that sort of thing. But anytime that you're compiling information and you need to get witness statements, or you need to do a full large scale investigation for your church, that needs to be your number one focus. And it's real easy to explain to the pastors and the church leadership that you're trying to help with that. And that's important, but they should, hopefully they understand that and certainly appreciate that you're trying to compile the data and do the best you can. I've done investigations before for our church leadership, our trustees, etc., where it literally took me 14 to 15 hours between going through videotape, talking to witnesses, trying to compile information and build a story and a narrative and say, let's look at everything, what really happened here. So keep it in mind that it's it's an important thing that should be taken seriously, for sure. One of our listeners, and I'll throw it over to you, Mike. One of our listeners commented and said, I would suggest having a public information officer. Some churches, if you're a smaller church, you probably wouldn't necessarily do that. But it warrants having a conversation with your church leadership, because and we've talked about this before on the broadcast, but if your pastor is talking or if your pastor's in the middle of a service and they're preaching, and all of a sudden media shows up to say, hey, we heard about this, how do we handle this? You need to have open lines of communication with that pastor to be able to address them, like what Mike said. And I can tell you, we've had those conversations at my church, and I don't assume anything. I've asked the church leadership and the senior pastor, would you like me to say something? How would you like me to handle it? Because I would be more readily available than you are if you're preaching or if you're indisposed at the moment. So having a plan and being able to push through that is more important than having necessarily a dedicated person. But have a working policy about it and a working understanding of if these individuals show up to handle media in any situation, not just, this type of situation, that'll take that'll take the sting off of it. If you've got a plan, how to handle it, then you'll be less nervous if the media were to ask you something, and less worried about what they're going to move forward with. So, Mike, did you want to add anything as we wrap up?
Closing thoughts, wrap us up, and I can close us in prayer if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it. All
right. I'm going to throw a couple last P's at us and close it in prayer. So we'll close out with saying, be proactive, be perceptive, and practice is kind of how I would say is how I would leave us. But Jeff, thanks for joining us tonight.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Appreciative of the friendship and the opportunity to continue
Absolutely.
to find ways to work together. Appreciate you coming on the show. And I know
Thank you so
James
much.
will get to see you maybe next month, and we'll catch you in Florida in May.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, we'll close this out. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity yet again to come before your people and talk about a topic of safety, keeping your flock safe. We thank you for our guest, Jeff, tonight. We thank you for ECAP. We thank you for all the effort to keep our kids safe as part of that broader safety and security ministry, but also just children's ministry itself. You may not have a safety or security team, so it may be something that you're just looking at it from your own kids' ministry. We ask you to protect over each and every child, our own as well as others in the churches that we attend. We ask those churches to open their eyes and understand the needs for things that were covered like tonight, and the checklists and the information and standards that Jeff talked about as well. Bless the week ahead in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and joining us. And as always, you can reach out to us through our website at churchsafetyguys.com or the church security app. You're welcome to reach out to us if you have any questions about church safety or security, or there's anything we can help you with. And we hope that you have a blessed week. Check out our website. Come visit us at the May conference down in Florida. You get to see all three of us. So that's a deal. But anyhow, have a blessed week, and we will talk to you next week. Same time, same place. Take care. God bless. Have a
Thanks,
great week.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.